new startup has entered the Australian market, helping renters to become homeowners, where renters can live now and buy later.
Bad news this morning for potential home buyers, with new research revealing housing affordability is set to slump to its worst levels in more than a decade.
Squeezing would-be first home buyers out of the market.
Now, prices are growing at their fastest rate in 32 years.
Sydney-siders are reverting back to more traditional concerns like trying to afford a home.
At this rate, I will never be able to own my own home. This feeling of hopelessness is how a lot of young Australians feel about getting into the housing market. If you have a dream to one day own the home that you live in, you are not alone. This is the desire of majority of young Australians. But in such a hot property market, it feels like just that, a dream. One that may never come true, no matter how many lattes we try to cut out. Not only is the property market and housing prices freakishly high, but personal debt in Australia is among one of the highest in the whole world, with the average millennial holding approximately $56,000 in personal debt. Contributing to the personal debt statistics is the prevalence of modern fintech buy now, pay later startups. With the sudden rise of popularity, startups like Klarna, Affirm and Afterpay are reaching crazy valuations. It's on the backdrop of these wildly popular buy now, pay later apps, as well as the housing market being so hot and oh so difficult to crack, that a new startup has entered the Australian market, helping renters to become homeowners. OwnHome, this new startup, will allow Australians to rent to own their home. Commonwealth Bank have just announced that their incubator will be backing this startup, offering up a whopping $31 million. Now, this idea is not new. It's been done in the US for years, but truthfully, I'd never heard of it here in Australia. So the way this works is the startup OwnHome provides a pathway to home ownership for those people who can afford the mortgage payments but haven't been able to save up the deposit. By buying a property for them in OwnHome's name and letting the person move in immediately by simply paying an upfront fee. So after making monthly payments over the period of 3 to 7 years, the renter is then able to exercise the option to purchase the house at the pre-agreed price. Now, I have a few thoughts already, and the fact that Commonwealth Bank has backed this idea, I'm already biased against it. But before I start dishing out my opinions on it, let's look at the fine print of how this whole process really works. So step 1 is pretty simple. It's the application process, and basically they're just assessing your ability to get a mortgage. Step 2, you actually go out and choose your dream home. Then you pay a 1.5% starter fee, which is purely a fee that goes to OwnHome, and it is non-refundable and it does not go towards you buying the property later. Step 3 says act like a homeowner. No more asking if you can hang that picture. Now, this is funny because literally when I asked earlier, like, what is the benefit of living in your own home right now? The only thing I could think of was being able to hang pictures and like maybe having a garden. But I really can't think of any other benefit that would justify losing a 1.5% starter fee. Like, if we're just looking at the concept of starting to live in your home right now, I can't see it. Also within step 3 is build your purchase offset each month. And so basically this means that every month you are building equity in the property. So you're paying your rent, and then on top of your rent, you're putting money towards this purchase offset. And that money is going towards the property. Each year you've put 2.5% of the home value away. So by the end of 5 years, for example, you've already paid 12.5% of that. So you pay the value of the property minus 12.5%. So then step 4, at the end of the 3 to 7 years, you have the option to purchase the home that you've been living in. Cool. So basically this is just an options contract, which I myself have actually entered into the property market through an options contract. The setup of my options contract is a little bit different though, and I think I'll have to go through that in another video because it gets quite complicated. The important thing for us as customers to think about is what happens if at the end of the 3 to 7 years you can't get a mortgage, or for whatever reason you can't exercise your option to buy the property. what happens to all of the money that you've already sunk into this property? This is a call options contract, which means that at the end of it, you're not obliged to actually purchase the property. So you can walk away from the option, you can exercise your right not to purchase, and there's no impact on your credit score, but you do lose all of the money that you sunk into this home. You lose everything. You've lost the starter fee, you've lost the initial option payment, and all of the purchasing offset that you've accrued. So basically all of your savings you've lost. This is similar to the risk that I've taken on with my own options contract. However, if I decide I don't want to exercise the right to purchase the property, then I don't lose any of my savings. I also can sell my right to the property. So I could sell the right to purchase the property to someone else. Now, OwnHome do mention this as a possibility, but it is not an explicit possibility. It says that it is only subject to OwnHome's approval. And so you could find yourself in a position where they will not allow you to sell your option, and then you've lost everything. They say that in specific scenarios of hardship, they will allow the selling of the option, but this again will come at another fee. So already I'm starting to see a few flaws in this process. I still don't understand why you wouldn't just rent and save. And we haven't yet determined like how much is the rent? Is it even market rent, or are you going to be paying extra rent? Okay, so here it is. Each month you'll be paying a monthly payment which includes rent and your purchase offset. This total figure equates to 7.05% per annum. So let's have a look at specific examples so that we can all be on the same page. So say you wanted to buy an $1 million property in Sydney. Over the whole year, you will have paid $75,000 to OwnHome. Now to me, that sounds like a staggering amount, especially as you're only gaining 2.5% equity in the property each year. So how much of that is actually rent and how much of that is your equity in the property? Let's have a look. So taking the $1 million property example again, if you're gaining 2.5% each year in equity, that's $25,000. So that means that you're paying $45K a year in rent in Sydney for a $1 million property. Yeah, that is absurd. Like, oh my goodness, to put this into perspective, the apartment that we are currently living in is in Sydney and it is currently valued at anywhere between $938,000 and $1.1 million. We pay $20,800 a year in rent. 45K, 20K. This is the part that boggles me. This is supposed to be for people who cannot save up a deposit. Maybe it's because they're willing to pay $25,000 extra in rent every year. Maybe. So already that's an additional $25,000 that you're losing every year because the rent is so high, just for the odd privilege of living in your own home and being able to hang paintings on the wall and maybe have a garden. That seems like a very steep price. This leads me to, I guess, the main question, and that is predetermined property price. Are you actually getting a good price? Is this going to be a good investment? For us, we were able to enter into an options contract on a property that was in a growth area because we were buying it as an investment property. We weren't buying it as our own home. That was the benefit for us. It was locking in a price in an area that was about to grow exponentially. But with this service through OwnHome, what if you locked in a price in the middle of a boom in an area like Sydney? Especially with big players like National Australia Bank predicting that the property market may drop in the future.
Which is what NAB's prediction is for 2023, a 10% fall in property prices.
Let's try and dig into that. Okay, so I've just found something interesting, and it is crucial that you are aware of this. OwnHome actually adds to the price of the property by 3.8% every year. So say you're buying a property for $1 million. After 5 years, you won't be paying $1 million for the property. You'll be paying $1,205,000. So basically, if you lock in that price of $1 million and the property market does not grow by 3.8% every year, then you might be overpaying for the property. The other thing with this is that even if it does grow higher, say at a rate of 4 to 5%, that would be great, but you're only seeing a marginal benefit because you've had to pay the extra 3.8%. So again, to compare, in the options contract that we have taken on, any of the growth that the property sees, we keep all of that. I've just found another part of the marketing which I absolutely hate, and I have to draw it to your attention. So a member of the CBA executive group has said that OwnHome is helping to address one of the biggest challenges currently facing first-time home buyers, which is finding new ways to save and put down a deposit on their cherished property. You might not immediately see what's wrong with that statement, but it is this word right here. The whole way that this is phrased, it is invoking an emotional response that really needs to be removed from the equation when you're taking on such a big financial responsibility and when looking to make money in the property market. In my opinion, in today's society, there is too much emphasis being put on this concept of owning your own home as a young person. For us, it makes a lot more financial sense and it's a lot more financially responsible for us to rent right now and not buy our own home, to actually enter into the property market as investors. I think that it's really important that we start to look at the way we're framing these conversations for young people. Why is it so important that they live in their own home right now? I would argue that it's much more important for a young person to start investing in the property market and to start owning investments for sure. But to own your own home, in my opinion, this is not necessary as a young person. I feel like this is just such an outdated idea that the only way to appear financially stable is to own your own home, and it is really pushed on young people. And they rush into making very big financial decisions at such a young age that they don't even realize that owning a home is not really an investment. In my opinion, financially, it makes much more sense to own investments, to start buying investments, and then later down the track, when you know where you want to settle, you're ready to settle down and you have the money and the flexibility to make more of an emotional choice, because buying a home is an emotional thing. Once you're ready, then you buy your home and you live in your own home. Let's sum up the pros and cons of this new startup. So the very first con, which I think is one of the main ones, is that the price that you are paying in rent is so much higher than market rent, and it takes away the opportunity to actually seek out and negotiate cheap rent and then put more money into your savings. So it's actually hindering your ability to save by a lot of money. $25,000 a year in that example with a $1 million property. The second con is one of the risks that you're taking on. So despite making financial contributions regularly towards this property, during this rent phase, as a tenant, you have no legal ownership. You only have the right to purchase the property at the end of that exercise period, which is 3 to 7 years. And this is the really tricky part for me, because there's no guarantee that you'll be able to get a mortgage at the end of the 3 to 7 years. As OwnHome does not offer any financing options at the moment, it is totally up to you to make sure that that financing comes through. Because if you've decided to buy a $1 million property in Sydney, but then at the end of that, for whatever reason, you can't purchase that property, you can't exercise the right to purchase the property, you are forfeiting a lot of money. You're forfeiting the starter fee, which is 1.5%, which is $15,000. You are forfeiting the initial option fee of $10,000. Then you are forfeiting all of the money that you've worked so hard to save, which, if this was over a 5-year period, would be 12.5% of equity in the home, which is about $150,000. That is a lot of money to potentially lose. The second risk that you're taking on is that the property does not grow by more than the 3.8%. One really good thing that I like about what OwnHome offers is that OwnHome does actually cover the costs of major maintenance. Even though you're acting like a homeowner, you don't have the responsibility of the big maintenance. So that is one plus. But in terms of like major renovations, that still has to go through an approval process through OwnHome. So you can really only like live like a homeowner to a certain extent, which really just kind of seems like half the benefit. The other pro is that you get to lock in the price now. So you get to lock in for $1 million property. Say you did it for 5 years, you would lock in the price of $1.2 million, which potentially would actually be lower. So then you're buying a property in 5 years that is below market value, and that is a huge pro. It's not guaranteed that that's going to happen, but if it does, then that's amazing. My personal overall thoughts about this entire thing, I don't like the overemphasis of young people needing to own their own home straight away. In my opinion, you are paying way too much in rent just for the slight benefit of being able to live in your own home immediately. And to be honest, if you can't save a deposit, but you can pay an extra $30K a year in rent just to have the benefit of living in your own home, I think we may have found your problem. And at risk of offense, you're wanting to live a lifestyle that you cannot afford right now. It would be much better to find a cheaper rent. I mean, we're living in $1 million property at literally a fraction of the price. We pay $20K a year in rent, and then we are able to save all of that extra money ourselves. The third thing is that I am not completely opposed to a call options contract. As I've mentioned, I myself have an options contract over a piece of land, and I truly think that they are a great way to get your foot in the door. I would just be very wary of the marketing and the companies that you are choosing to go through. We personally decided on this alternative path so that we could buy an investment property, so that we could buy a property in an area that we don't need to live in right now that will experience growth, and it has. In the 2 years that we've been in the contract, we've seen amazing growth in that area. We don't need to live in the property right now because it's an investment, whereas OwnHome specifically is only operating in Sydney, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Newcastle, Wollongong. They don't operate everywhere just yet, so your choice of getting like a growth area is somewhat more limited. I also think the 3.8% per annum like fee that you're agreeing to is probably a little high. I mean, they've chosen that number based off how the property market has grown historically in the past. But it is a short period of time, and the risk is that you're assuming it's going to grow by, at the very bare minimum, just to break even, 3.8%. But you would ideally be hoping that it's going to be growing at much more than that to make the starter fee and all of the other fees worth it, as they're adopting this marketing line that it is an altruistic company doing it for the greater good of the struggling young Australians and their family, but they're like willing to charge them $30K extra in rent a year. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying what they're selling. And finally, to be completely upfront with you guys and my inherent bias, I very much dislike Commonwealth Bank. I don't like their marketing. It's very good marketing, but I don't think that it's honest. And so I am very much inclined to not trust this service now that Commonwealth Bank has backed it. But that is all completely my own thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know in the comments. Be sure to give the video a like, but please don't subscribe unless you really enjoyed this video and this sort of content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. That was freaking long. Yeah. Oh, I'm sweaty. My knees hurt. I got low.